The gym smelled of sweat, ambition, and the echo of dreams being hammered into shape. Heavy bags swung from chains, their dull thuds echoing like war drums. Men and women in uniforms stretched, practiced katas, or sparred under the watchful eyes of instructors. At the far corner, a man in his late 20s, towering with a broad chest and thick arms, adjusted the black belt around his waist with the pride of someone who thought he owned the room. His name was Brandon, a regional martial arts champion who had a reputation for arrogance that was almost as strong as his kicks. Brandon wasn't just a fighter. He was the type who needed to prove himself even when there was no challenge. He thrived on attention, on laughter, on showing dominance. When he trained, he didn't just demonstrate techniques. He performed them as if he were on stage, craving the admiration of every pair of eyes watching. And today, he found his target. She was small, shockingly small compared to the rest of the gym. A little girl, no more than 10, sitting quietly on the bench with her hands folded neatly in her lap. She wore an oversized gi that seemed to swallow her thin frame, the white belt dangling loosely like a ribbon that didn't belong to her yet. Her hair was tied in a neat ponytail, her big brown eyes scanning the mats as if every movement carried hidden lessons. Her name was Emily. Emily didn't speak much. She was the kind of child people overlooked, especially in a place filled with warriors twice her size. To the adults, she looked like she was playing dress-up in her uniform, but to Emily, this gym was sacred ground. She came here because it was the last promise her father made to her before he passed away. Her father, a soldier and a martial artist himself, had once knelt beside her, placed his calloused hands on her small shoulders, and whispered, "Emily's strength isn't about size. It's about spirit. And your spirit is stronger than you know." Those words had carried her through grief, through fear, through nights when she cried into her pillow. She wanted to honor his memory by training, learning, and one day becoming just like him. But Brandon didn't know that. All he saw was a child in his domain, and children to him were nothing but props for his humor. "Hey, look at this," Brandon called out loudly, drawing the attention of the others. He pointed toward Emily with a smirk that curled like smoke. "We've got a future champion here. Don't you all think she should show us what she's got?" The room chuckled. A few shook their heads, embarrassed at his antics, but no one dared oppose him. After all, he was the black belt, the winner of tournaments, the man who trained harder and hit harder than most. Emily lowered her gaze. She didn't like attention. Her heart pounded in her chest, her fingers tightening on the fabric of her gi. She wasn't scared of fighting. She was scared of being mocked. She didn't want to be laughed at. But her father's voice whispered again in her memory, steady and calm, "Strength isn't about size." Brandon strutted over to her like a lion circling a lamb. He crouched down to her level, his grin wide and mocking. "So, little one, how about you and me? Just for fun. I promise I won't hurt you." The laughter around them grew louder. Emily looked up, her eyes calm but burning with something no one expected. She didn't answer with words. She simply stood up, bowed politely the way she had been taught, and walked to the center of the mat. Her small frame looked fragile under the harsh gym lights, yet every step she took carried a weight that made the room quiet down. Brandon raised his eyebrows. He hadn't expected her to accept. This was supposed to be a joke, a performance for the crowd. But the girl had just flipped the script. "All right then," Brandon said, rolling his shoulders, exaggerating the cracks in his neck as if preparing for a championship fight. "Don't cry if you fall." The instructor, sensing the growing tension, hesitated but allowed it. "Light sparring only," he said firmly. "Brandon, remember, she's a beginner." Brandon just smirked and nodded. He wasn't planning to hurt her. He was planning to embarrass her, to show everyone how silly it was for a little girl to think she belonged on the same mat as him. They bowed. Emily's small body bent with perfect discipline. Brandon's bow was sloppy, half-hearted. The match began. Brandon moved first, circling her with exaggerated footwork, tossing playful jabs into the air. The crowd chuckled. Emily stood perfectly still, her eyes locked on him, not flinching, not moving, just watching. Her father had taught her that patience was the first weapon of a warrior. Brandon lunged forward suddenly, tapping her shoulder with his hand like a schoolyard bully. He laughed, retreating. The audience laughed too. But Emily didn't. She reset her stance, her breathing steady, her face unreadable. The second time, he flicked a kick toward her leg, pulling it back before it made contact. "Ooh, close one," he teased, raising his arms like a showman. Still, Emily didn't move. Her silence began to bother him. He expected fear or tears or maybe anger. But she was just calm, too calm. "Come on, kid, show me something," he taunted, stepping closer. This time, he reached out to tap her forehead with his palm. But before he could, Emily shifted. Her movement was fast, faster than anyone expected. With a sharp sidestep, she caught his wrist, twisted it with precision, and dropped her weight just enough to unbalance him. Brandon stumbled forward, shock flashing across his face as the crowd gasped. Emily released him instantly, stepping back into her stance like nothing happened. The room went silent. Brandon blinked. His ego stung. "Lucky move," he muttered, trying to laugh it off. But inside, something burned. He hadn't expected her to know anything, let alone execute a clean wrist lock that caught him off guard. This time, he wasn't going to play. He stepped forward faster, throwing a light but real jab toward her chest. Emily's eyes flickered, reading his movement, and in a split second she pivoted, deflecting his arm with her forearm and using his momentum to push him off balance again. He staggered backward, his heels nearly slipping on the mat. The silence grew heavier. The onlookers were no longer laughing. They were watching. Emily's breathing was steady, her stance low, her eyes locked on him with a focus that belonged to a warrior twice her age. She wasn't mocking him. She wasn't even trying to win. She was simply doing what she had been taught. Flow with the opponent, use their strength against them, stay calm. Brandon felt his pride boiling. A grown man, a black belt, nearly toppled by a child. This was supposed to be a joke, not a humiliation. He clenched his fists tighter, his jaw grinding. "All right, kid," he growled under his breath, "you want to play? Let's play." But what happened next would leave the entire gym speechless.